What was that? Artificial sky, a concert hall inside the fort-like castle, a giant smoking ice ball, gifts, cards, homemade candle cake, dining in two different restaurants, and even enjoying a dashing Broadway river dance show with an incredible cross-ethnic fusion of Spanish fiery flamenco or Moldovan hora or urban funk, all under the same Irish rhythms of Cayley with the famous quadrilles, reels, jigs, and raw dancing. And the answer is a simple one. I am officially a milestone parent. This January, my son turned 20 years of age. For a single parent like myself, that's a pivotal moment of reflection on a vicenial period that started from a cute baby boy, a gift from heaven, as he was born like an entirely formed small man boss. Becoming an elegant, strong young man and currently a college student with A grades. This is the Vicentimus January, and I will start sharing the way my son and I celebrated it, followed by a backward tour of our travels together from his childhood to the present day. For the big day, my son had picked up an eatery from a scarce list of options, as his birthday was on Monday and some of his favorite restaurants were closed. So, after a small celebration at home with unpacking of the gifts, we headed to the sugar factory at 1080 Peachtree Street, Northeast Atlanta. On his birthday, my son, a sophisticated guy, had a strange shift of preferences, ordering everyday simple things such as cremini mushrooms, stir-fried steak, or firecracker shrimp. But we had a good time. The ice cream and the smoking ice bowl were free, the sugar factory's gifts on his birthday. Count of three, I want y'all to help me wish my friend a happy birthday. 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. His favorite gift from me was the river dance tickets. From January 27th to 29th, 2023, Atlanta's Fox Theater was hosting the Broadway show for 3 days. I picked up the 28th for the river dance, which was Saturday daytime. Now join me as I walk you through our experience from the Fox entrance to the stage. Waiting for the show to start. In the meantime, enjoying the staging and decoration, including the artificial sky. Bear in mind that videotaping and photography were allowed only during the breaks. Recording the show was forbidden. I somehow managed to tape it with the phone partly hidden in my pocket, and only the climax of the outstanding performances, merging ethnic flares into the choreographic masterpieces such as urban funk or flamenco or hora or Andalusian corazon in the spirit of Irish quadrilles and step dancing. Having that said, you will only see short and unpredictable fragments of the show. Now let's go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Regents Night Broadway and Atlanta series at the Fox Theater. Thank you for coming. The show will begin shortly.
During the break, we use refreshments in the bar of the theater. Look at the prices. After the show, we left the Fox Theater for dinner to re-celebrate my son's birthday. The restaurant bistro, known as PDH, was right at the corner of Peachtree Street Northeast, next to the theater. Thank you. For the appetizers, we ordered soup for me and apple walnut salad for my son. The entree was duck quesadilla and medium rare prime rib. My son enjoyed it. He likes duck. This one piece of meat was $58. You will check the receipt shortly after. The dessert was apple tart with vanilla ice cream, just like the one we had in Montana. Check on this channel. It was a lovely January dinner. The bill arrived. Now, as promised, I will take you for a backward or retrospective tour of my travels with my son. Note that my solo travels in Europe, Canada, or Asia before my son was born are not included in this video. These are the visa stamps for my travels in Europe for various programs: Austria 1, Austria 2, Belgium twice under a multi-entrance visa, Austria again in 2007, Hungary 1 to Debrecen, Hungary 2 to Budapest, Serbia, Belgrade for a keynote speech sponsored by the American Consul. SIDA has sponsored my 2 Canadian programs in Ontario and Manitoba. I have visited the United States 5 times until I finally decided to stay settled and get the permanent residence for my scientific records and get another one for my son as my dependent, and thereafter the citizenship. These are not all my travels, as our passports were renewed every 10 years. 2 of my passports are currently not with me. One is my very first passport with visa stamps to Prague, Czech Republic, which I visited in 1986 when I was still a medical student. or to Baltic states and other northern and eastern European countries. There is also an intermediate passport currently hiding somewhere. That one bore visa stamps for France, Germany, and Swiss. I really have traveled a lot, and you may even notice that there were times when I visited 3 countries in the same year. However, the focus of this video is my travels with my son. As he turned 20 this January, I will cover 20 years of our travels together, skipping my trips in solo. Now, there are bitter lunatic thugs who take the liberty to misinterpret my personal life. They produce bizarre conspiracy theories, their projections. So even my personal life is nobody's business. These hooligan misanthropes have created for me the need to clarify my personal journey in public, because whatever I, a single mother, do or achieve alone is neither believed nor appreciated. I will present my story based on facts and documentations. My son was conceived in Washington, D.C. As I mentioned before, I have had 5 visits to the United States before my decision to remain and reside. The first one was in 2000, after I visited Austria and Hungary in the same year. It was under J1 visa for a regional scholar exchange program administered by the Department of State American Consul and stationed at George Washington University, District of Columbia. There I met a charming young full professor. He was just 5 years older than me. As my program was short-term, 4 months, we only met twice for non-romantic dinners where we talked about science and possible collaboration. In December 2000, I timely left the US after my program as required by law. Check my travels in Belgium, France, and Serbia in the following year of 2001. During that year, we maintained our communication via emails and phone calls. In October 2001, he invited me to visit him in DC. He clearly expressed his intent to know me better, with possible marriage in his mind. As I was planning to visit Canada for a CEDA program the next January, I applied only for a 30-day permit, which you can see from my second B2 visa for tourism. I paid for my trip to DC. So with my intent to visit DC only for a month, he then asked me to prolong my stay, and he paid for the visa extension. He also contacted my Canadian colleagues in Toronto, asking them to postpone my program, which they did, but they gave me 5 months only, bringing my visit date to June. So we lived together in DC for 5 months. Let me pause here briefly to refer to a detail for further cause-outcome chain analysis. In the fall of the former year, 2001, not only had I invitations to DC and Toronto, Canada, but also I got a job in Kosovo, and my start was supposed to be next January 2002. Up to the last month, the Doctors of the World Organization, the UN Program Administrator, abruptly reversed the job offer extended to me. Then I had no idea that this low intellect, narrow horizon, envious peasant that always stalked me had got a job in Kosovo through the same program. Learning that I was about to start a job with higher salary than hers, and in Pristina, the capital of Kosovo, while she was stationed in a tertiary city, Gajilan, she had scammed a fake negative letter of reference on my address, forging an unaware colleague's signature. I still would choose DC and Canada over Kosovo, but materially, she deprived me of earning about 80,000 US dollars. Little did I know then that this would not be her last and biggest harm. Reversing my job offer through a pesky fraud wasn't enough for her. Learning that I was in DC, she started sending me uninvited and exploratory emails trying to read my mind, as she was suspicious that I was building my personal life while she was hunting unsuccessfully though for men. I ignored her. She persisted. She was harassing me to the extent that I had to block her. Years after, she would do everything in the US to ruin my life by email fabrications as she masters fraud. I will explain the details in my book. In 2002, due to my visa, I couldn't work in the US while the Canadian program was offering me payment. I tried all I could, even started working as a research associate in the immunology department of George Washington University. I even have an article published from that project in 2002, but when it came to paying me after 3 months of my attendance, the grantor asked me to reverse my visa to J1 visa again, and for that I had to wait for several months without income. So I chose the Canadian program that was paying me straightforwardly. Close to the end, in April, we stopped protection and I immediately got pregnant. My flight ticket from DC was on the evening of April 27th, and I suspected that I was pregnant a day before, like Miss Fate, because my reproductive health was always perfect as in clockwork, and for me even 1 day delay would mean pregnancy. So on the morning of the flight day, we went to CVS and purchased 3 pregnancy tests. I tried the first one a few hours prior to my flight, and the results showed negative, which eventually was false negative. I flew to Moscow to get my Canadian visa. See here, I got it on May 2nd, in the next week. During the flight to Moscow and my stay in Moscow, the 2 remaining pregnancy tests turned positive. The sonography confirmed pregnancy. I visited Canada when I was a first trimester pregnant. I always tell my son that he traveled with me to Canada and saw Niagara Falls from the Canadian side. I do have lovely pictures of Toronto, which are not with me, but I hope to recover them for my upcoming book. The only evidence of the Canadian visit I have at the moment are the visa, a certificate, and the Canadian colleague's congratulations after I gave birth. People confirmed that after learning about my childbirth, Karina was angry and couldn't hide her malice and despair, as she was a childless, wandering woman and nobody wanted her. The happiness of maternity came with a big price, though. My evil aunt had influenced my mother to rehome my precious cats as if they were incompatible with a newborn at home, which is not true, of course. While I was in the hospital, they rehomed the cats. Later, we established that my aunt had sold my cats. During my son's infancy, my mom provided monumental help in the best possible way. My child was lucky to have her. She was retired then, and I was working full-time. I also sold my German car, Opel Ascona, to cover my expenses. Elias, the father of my son, offered help by phone, which I rejected. His mother, a Greek who lived in Athens and who was a former OBGYN doctor, happy for my son's arrival, invited me and my son to visit her in Greece, as I'm showing here her mailed invitation package. My son was her first and eventually the only grandchild. But again, I had an overlapping offer, a Fulbright program, Humphrey Fellowship, at Emory, Atlanta, Georgia. Here you see my son, 2.5 years of age, in Georgia. My mom was with me in the US during the entire program. Here I need to mention that I had lost my marvelous dad, an MD PhD, to accidental death when he was 49 and I was just 17. My mom never remarried. You, my darling, you, bittersweet memories.
Your host? Ella.
More Atlanta Pictures, 2005. Elias, my son's father, visited us in Georgia during my Fulbright program at Emory. Should be told that he had nothing to do with my grants, awards, or program invitations from either country. I have achieved those myself. He came with a mountain of expensive gifts. For the kid, he had picked up the best brands such as Oshkosh, Cavalli, Montclair. This was the first time he was seeing his son, and he was happy. He even wanted us to have the second child at that time, but I wasn't sure. Now, of course, I regret it. I also mistreated him a little bit, which contributed to his decision to move on with his life without us. During my Humphrey program, I took my baby boy to Chattanooga, Tennessee, Cumberland, Maryland, and Richmond, Virginia. We had a conference in Maryland where I met the GWU colleague whose name was used by Karine Martirosyan in the fake negative letter against me to ruin my Kosovo job in 2001, and who categorically denied writing any letter on my address. Upset by the discovery, I emailed Karine Martirosyan from my private email address, asking for explanations. In response, she attacked my Emory email account as well as Emory listserv with insulting emails where not only did she avoid answering my question, but also she called me hurtful names, threatened to contact my Humphrey Fellows. And this is the same peasant who was harassing me when I was in DC a few years ago. Her insults and threats sent to my Emory network were so aboriginal, severely offensive, that in my place somebody else would sue and even prosecute this monster. But I didn't, because I'm not the kind of person who collects nasty emails to prosecute, to ruin a destiny, or to sue to collect money, the way that the same Karine makes her living. Shortly after that email, her friend Marina Mkhitaryan, aka Marina Noble from Watertown, Massachusetts, emerged into the scene, and without my invitation, she started emailing and phone calling me to Atlanta. She lied that she had located my email address and phone number from the internet. In fact, she was instructed to contact and explore my mind by the same Karine Martirosyan. These two malicious and dangerous women have always been close friends and even roommates for years, but each of them have been always denying publicly about their closeness and friendship, pretending as they even hate each other. Based on Karine's anxiety and panic disorder, Marina Noble wanted to learn whether I intended to stay in the US after the program and whether I would sue Karine. She also invited me to visit her in Boston, which I refused. I will leave this part to later present sequences of damaging events in 2007 and further, and will return to my program, which ended in 2006. Close to the end of the Humphrey program, I had arranged a paid extension based on the grant that I was awarded by Dr. Carlos Del Rio, professor of infectious diseases at Emory School of Medicine and Grady Hospital, and Dr. Sevgi Aral from the HIV, STD, TB division at the CDC. I was offered a monthly payment way higher than our Fulbright stipend. All was lawful, legal, and the visa was being extended for me, my son, and my mother. Sadly, we had this sneaky Armenian lizard in our group, Ruben, who maliciously ruined my award and extension by sending complaints to our local embassy and misleading them. Based on that, the local embassy sent me an ultimatum that I had to drop everything and return, as my extension wasn't viewed as necessary by them. The American side, the Grady, the CDC, the grantors, and the IIE were happy to keep me. All was arranged. Yet Ruben ruined it all. Another nefarious Armenian backstabber like Karine, whom I mentioned before. As my already installed program extension was ruined in 2006, I lost a lot of money this time. My son, then 3 years old, was sad with the news. As a smart kid, he clearly understood two things: that there would be no father in his life and that we were returning back to uncertainty. These pictures are taken from our last days in Atlanta when he was packing his little luggage and he was heartbroken. Back home, I faced unexpected abusive events. My non-biological relatives from maternal side wanted to remove me and my toddler son from the property where I lived for 30 years. Formerly, my mother had allowed her younger sister to stay in our home while we were in the States, plus to receive and use my mother's retirement stipend every month. Pampered in comfort, my aunt developed a zealous appetite to take our home for her grandkids and throw me and my toddler son out. She physically attacked and cursed me, to the extent that I had to call police and obtain a restraining order against her. And I was heartbroken, observing that my mom didn't condemn her sister's abusive actions against me, especially when my child was witnessing that all. My darling mother and I still deeply loved each other, but we were different now. Unfortunately, I didn't realize then that by her play of unusual coldness, my mother wanted to buffer her evil sister and by that to protect me, because she knew that there was much more to expect from that woman who was pressuring my mother to choose between her, a biological sister, and me. In practical actions, my mom was still devoted. For example, during the same months, she provided alone an extraordinary, amazing care of my son while I was in the hospital for surgery. Or when I flew to Austria and Swiss in 2007, I left my son with her again and she provided the warmest possible and profoundly loving care. During those traumatic events, I decided to contact Elias, the father of my son. It was 2007. 2 years passed since he came to see us in the States during the Humphrey program. He responded with empathy. At that point, I decided to take my son and move to DC, so my boy would grow with a father. But I did it secretively, trying to surprise Elias. For that, I submitted abstracts to 2 conferences in DC and North Carolina, received their invitation letters, based on which I obtained the 4th visa to the US, the B1 business visa. Prior to that visit, I flew to Austria for another Salzburg event. See here the European visa and the certificate. Shortly after returning from Austria, my son and I flew to Washington, D.C. As I hadn't informed Elias about our intent to visit him, I had pre-arranged a lodging at my friend's place in Potomac, Maryland. My friend Lucy was a wonderful Jewish-Russian woman. Shortly after, my son and I headed to D.C. to meet Elias. To our shock, we found him with all packed luggages. He had already terminated the lease of rented apartment and was about to fly to Greece for a 2-year contract. He praised me, even called my move heroic, but he was about to leave, so I appeared in a dangerous uncertainty. As the visa was for 6 months stay, I decided to use that time fully to preschool my son and see whether we could permanently settle. Finding a job was a challenge in DC or Maryland. The fastest way was to move to Massachusetts. Should be told that while we were in Yerevan in 2006, Marina Noble was emailing me intensively, complaining about her daughter Asnif's obesity, mental disorders, and also asking if I would ever visit her in Massachusetts. Should be told that Marina wasn't the person to introduce America to me. Unlike me, Marina did not visit the US several times before settling, without any knowledge in English. She had managed to sneak into the highly corrupt Muskie program to get to the United States. Per her own words, her father had been bribing the Muskie board in Armenia with canisters of stolen petrol from the taxi company where he worked, and her essay had been written by another woman. Once she entered to the US for the first time, she overstayed and stressfully overcame the barriers as she got pregnant by a random man from dating sites and to waive the 212E obligation that comes with J1 visa. She misrepresented her adjustment intent that she was a caregiver to an American citizen with serious chronic illnesses, neurosis, and alcoholism. In addition, then they could not marry because Bill Noble was married to another woman. Unlike her and her friend Karine, I received my green card based on national interest waiver, a merit-based immigration, for my scientific contributions and gravity, as opposed to Marina's embarrassing method, such as getting pregnant from the random man from dating sites and having the Americans pity her. I had to go with these details because later, in her vicious libels, Marina Noble would name me a surrogate mother, a one-night stand, and I'm sorry for this obscenity, I'm just repeating her words. Her libels were extremely hurtful because Elias wasn't married. We lived together almost 6 months, and my son is my normally conceived biological son. And having that baby was our bilateral choice. So now I am reduced to explaining how I met my son's father and when my son was conceived. Marina is an obsessed, malicious, helpless stalker, and on several occasions she has been perfectly honest by attacking me like, "Don't jump over our heads," meaning her empty head and her crime friend Karine Martirosyan's simpleton patsy head. So even after knowing who she was, I took the risk. Recalling all her redundant invitations, I phone called her from DC and purchased Amtrak tickets to Boston. With me were 3 big luggages, my laptop, and my toddler son. When the Amtrak doors opened and I had to make a fast exit, nobody approached to help me move the luggage onto the truck. I hugged my son, pushed the tall luggages with my knees, throwing them to the platform, then exited with my son. I was prepared to the extent of having our own bedding, so I would not inconvenience Marina with our stay. Marina was late for about 2 hours from the promised meeting time. Upon her arrival, she rudely said, "Did you think that I would cut my morning sleep for you?" But this wasn't the sole episode of her disrespectful attitude. During my short interaction with Marina Noble, she was mocking and slandering almost everybody I know, including her friend Karine. Meantime, every third word in her very primitive vocabulary was the P word in reference to men. The question was why she was so sexually anxious when she was already a married woman. Back in her country, everybody knew her for harassing married men and trying to dissolve families and make a place for herself and her daughter. And also complaining about co-workers, neighbors. There she was in constant misery and malcontent. Here in the US again, she had complained and had her co-worker, co-receptionist get fired from the 3D sonography office in Brookline, Massachusetts, where Marina was working as a receptionist. Per her words, her second husband, Bill Noble, had a restraining order from his first ex. Marina was the only income holder working in 2 places for a low wage, $20 per hour. They were very poor in 2007, surviving on charity cans, and they had an old, almost undrivable russet-colored car, bargained from Craigslist, leaking from the bottom, and they lived in rented apartment in Glen Street, Watertown. My son and I stayed there for a night. We were not offered any food or drink, but that's okay, as I was prepared and stuffed well for my son. We stayed just 1 night, not several months, not several weeks or days, as she inconsistently lies. Soon it became clear that the reason she was calling us was to increase their food stamp benefit line and tax refunds, intending to claim us as their household members and dependents, while we would not even live with them and we would remain unaware. She had practiced such fraud before, using others' names. She hadn't figured out that my B visa couldn't be adjusted to permanent residency that fast for her to claim us as household members for her benefits. Finding us useless for her plans, she threw us out next day to an illiterate Armenian family's house on School Lane, Watertown, where my son and I had to share a lead-painted basement with an active prostitute tenant, Arevik, Marina's low-life friend. And I have never lived in basements before that and after, let alone sharing it with a roommate. It was dreadfully offensive and disrespectful to my son. I asked Marina why did she humiliate us. She answered, "You know, Naira, I have gone through a lot, sitting dogs, earning on tips, staying in basements. So you are not a princess, you have to go through that path too." Luckily, I almost didn't see the face of Arevik. She would return at 5 a.m. every morning, have a shower, and leave again at 8 a.m. Strangely, a week later, Marina came to take us to her workplace at 521 Mount Auburn Street, Watertown, where she was cleaning the office and also aiding with the data entry. Taking us there after work hours, she literally insisted me to check my emails on one of the computers in the corridor, not the one that she was using. She was entering data in another computer in the same corridor, as she didn't have a private room. Soon after, she hacked my emails and sent obscenity under my name to people who knew and respected me. By the way, she couldn't and didn't drive a car in 2007, and she was taking us to places by walking. I remember her trying to cross the street when she impulsively grabbed the hand of my toddler son and pulled him to cross the street with her under the red light. I was petrified. During that month, without my awareness or permission, she opened a profile on date.com website under my name and with my picture, vulgarly titling it 8 Love 8. She showed me the profile and shared its password. I was spellbound, but I was afraid to remove that profile immediately, as she would be upset and would open another one, and this time she would not even inform me. So I entered that profile and changed the password to block her access. Finding it out the next day, she was mad at me because her access was denied. The basement she threw us in was even worse. The walls were lead painted. They would open my mail and read it before they would handle it to me. There was no central conditioning, and in that summer season with high humidity, the house owner took away the fan to save on his electric bill at the expense of our suffering. Yet I was paying them fully and timely. I had enough money from my own savings. In 2 weeks, I managed to find a proofreading contract and was paid honorarium, a type of income permitted under my visa. I managed to place my son in a private preschool in Cambridge. Learning about my speedy moves, Marina had told the landlord to cut my internet and even change the lock and leave me and my son on the streets. The house owner cut the internet, but of course he did not move us out, as I had paid fully and upfront. My child and I stayed there only for a few weeks until I found for us a convenient second-floor apartment in Somerville. It is abhorrent that to this day Marina Noble lies publicly that she has helped us. And not only that, by spreading her delusions that she has helped me, which indeed are severe delusions, because she's incapable to help, she only can harm, people would think that I'm ungrateful. And among other horribly false declarations about me, that alone, as me being ungrateful, was enough to damage my character as a potential employee. Among other mental illnesses, this bottomless liar has patromanic psychosis, determined that she helps everybody and all owe her their successes. This is her pattern. At first, she denies others' achievements because she's malicious, salacious, and she doesn't have those achievements. And when the evidence is so overwhelming that she cannot deny, she claims that she must be given a credit for someone's achievement. Just like that. I'm sharing this video not before, but after the gag orders to silence me, so I will not even explain the harm I have suffered. And under harm, I not only mean her nasty, poisonous, inhumane, obscene, vulgar libels about me, flooding the internet for decades, but also her vicious stalking of my personal life, blocking my suitors, harassing my son, my son's father, getting into his finances, finding my relatives and offering them her help in their fight for my property. Attacking my authored books on Amazon, wanting my properties by pre-written texts that she handles to the corrupt judges to sign in front of me, contacting my universities, my potential employers, my social media connections. I'm already lost. I don't know from where to start. Marina Noble's face alone meets almost all forensic criteria for a criminal, cunning personality. In addition, crooked teeth, sign of negligent parents who not only didn't correct those on time, but also didn't nurture her, obviously. And this is Marina's hysterical, stupid daughter, Asnif, a coward who didn't appear before the court in 2018 because her physical appearance would destroy their case. The mother of this woman has been mocking and wounding our children in public for no reason. These two junkie sluts who were dumped from their country as untalented dangers who stayed in the US in humiliating and dishonest ways are lying that I was the perpetrator of this war that started in 2010 and lasts to this day. I was the perpetrator? What about Karine, who in the 90s was insulting my mother with her megalomaniac paranoid offenses when both my mother and I were ignoring her, trying not to fall to her level, and also considering that she was a failure? What about her sneaking into a Kosovo program, learning there that I was offered a higher paid job and ruining my success by a mail fraud? What about Karine and her friend Marina Noble living together as roommates, were defaming, slandering me on a daily basis when I was already enjoying my motherhood and they were still old and unwelcome spinsters, denying my degrees, honors, travels, awards, articles, books, as they had none of those, and stalking me to the extent that I had to take my son, then 7-year-old baby, and move to Georgia to firewall them from our lives. I even changed my legal name, which didn't even help. They still harassed me in Georgia by hiring private detectives, which was confirmed by their own friend Ara messaging me in Facebook. They were libeling me to push me or my son to suicide. They simply could not endure my strengths and success. And I had to obtain restraining order against them and also have my magistrate court serve them with arrest warrants. Then they brought phony, malicious, fallacious, and even salacious legal actions against me, some 6-7 actions simultaneously, to silence me. And they failed, even when I was fighting alone, pro se. I hate to be known as victim, but the fact of the matter is that I am the one with losses, not them. And I am the perpetrator after all. These two nasty, evil sluts from humble origins simply melted under the American shock syndrome, and they embraced that competitive spirit in such a morbid and hysterical way. What they did to me was worse than murder. Back to 2007. During this short period of 6 months, under my B1 visitor status, I accomplished a lot and alone. My child had a state Medicaid, he was schooled, I had signed a year-long lease of a second-floor apartment in a good location, Somerville, finally securing peace and privacy for my son. As a single parent, I always furnished the places I lived with my son, ordering and assembling alone furniture, even assembling my toddler's cars. Sadly, my stalkers not only deny my awards, degrees, travels, the novelty in my publications or even my publications, but also the fact that wherever we would move, I was always making a comfortable home for my son. My son is now a wise young man, and with God's blessings, he's not an Armenian. And I ask him why only these Armenian misanthropes choose to disbelieve what I say or do. And his answer is because what you do is too much for them, as they are too low life and too behind. This is me and my son during my first visit in Massachusetts. This is my son in kindergarten. This performance was televised. As you see, he's singing and meantime holding his trousers by hands because the suspenders were broken. would often take him to the Greek church in Cambridge to solidify his sense of identity. Thereafter, we would go to eat something outside. In November, I got an offer from Boston University for a 2-year postdoctoral fellowship in psychology, not my field. I also had an option in a CEDA-funded program in Manitoba, Canada. I chose Boston, and I regret it now. To start the program at BU, I had to change my B visa to J1 again, but this time a good J1 type without 212E section, which allowed me later to adjust my status and receive the green card. To get that J1 visa in 2007, I either had to file to the USCIS and remain in the States for months without income, waiting for the decision, or to fly back to my country and get the J1 visa at the local consulate, a faster option. BU department preferred the second speedy option. So, on December 18th, my son and I flew back and got the visa in a week. We spent some time with my mother, whom we had been missing so much. Then returned back to Massachusetts, see here, in January 2008, where I already had rented and furnished apartment. I had cut my ties with Marina Noble, so she was unaware of my postdoc program and my 5th visit. Years after, she was posting libels on the internet that I'm lying, I'm not a postdoc, I'm just a short-term intern that has overstayed her tourism time, which were very damaging, with their lingering effect on my unemployment in the further decade. Again, this is not the only damage she has caused us. Embracing the 2-year postdoctoral program with a granted extension, I was speedy, hardworking, profoundly devoted to my tasks, even more than what was required. I gained high respect and friendship by my coworkers, as seen in my earned grants, group emails of gratitude, or reference letters. Psychology wasn't my field, but they needed an MD to enter the public health arena. As an OBGYN specialist, I was assigned to conduct a linkage analysis between women's mental health and sexual health, but I expanded my scope to the interface of mental and reproductive health, or mental health and dental health. This explains my cross-disciplinary articles with sole authorship and without Boston University's involvement. In 2010, secretively from BU, I self-petitioned and was granted permanent residency for the U.S. national interest. As the BU department was female-governed, I expected petty and toxic attacks. Overall, I was the only medical doctor. The first pernicious and performative psychosis was observed in this Haiti descent Marie Messidor, another postdoc, years younger than I, a psychologist, who would attack and insult me without any trigger, to the extent that I had to ask the management to change my workstation to be isolated from her. She would shave her face every single day, as the next day would be late. Among the witnesses of Marie's aggressions was a research assistant whose desk was behind ours. For complaining about Marie's self-entitlement to Sally Rogers, the director of research division. That woman was fired the next day. We never saw her again. Sally Rogers was shielding and protecting Marie because Marie had lied that her sister was a chief staff member of Obama's cabinet. In fact, her sister is another phony con artist without a realistic work history. Marie Messidor would wear knitted dirty black gloves in the middle of summer inside the workplace, arriving late not greet us, angrily throw her bags on the floor, bizarrely sanitize the receiver of the corded phone in the postdoc area. It was 2008, so yes, there still was that old-fashioned corded phone. Instead of doing her job, she would often close herself in Sally Rogers' room and endlessly complain. As a postdoc, Marie was unable to offer scientific ideas and would think on the anecdotal level. Sally Rogers was allocating the funds to her from my conference trips or studies. To promote Marie over me, Sally Rogers was removing my study flyers from the walls of the center so research subjects attending the center would not see and subscribe. There was another tactless nuisance, Zlatka Rusinova, a Bulgarian immigrant 9 years older than I, who would name my English awful while she could not put together two English words without an accent and would talk like a parrot. We need to talk about, or provider competencies, or the words. She would attack me accusing that I misspelled certain words because she did not know the correct spelling of those words. And in front of me she would turn her rolling chair to her desk to type impromptu a complaining email about me when actually she was wrong. As a toddler's single mom, I endured all this, missing so many chances because peace was my strategy. I was avoiding conflicts. Sally Rogers confessed in the end of the program that her negating behavior wasn't personally but rather politically motivated. My working speed was paining her and Zlatka, who once told me, "You must slow down." I had to recruit 40 subjects for my study and I recruited 74 instead, and by doing so I spent only the 1/3 of the grant money because I was transcribing the taped interviews myself, as opposed to others who were hiring transcribing companies for $200 per hour. I saved the 2/3 of the funds because I also worked in kind, which was never appreciated. I can't forget when in December 2009, after the staff meeting where I reported my completed study results and expenses, I caught angry Sally Rogers talking to Zlatka in the kitchen as, despite of her barriers, I had proven her wrong in front of the entire center. On December 23rd, I visited the BU Treasury with all receipts of my study expenses and closed the grant, leaving the unused funds to the BU Treasury. This pissed Sally Rogers off because without even my efforts, the dean saw how much one could accomplish with very little money and in such a short period. During my postdoc years, my son's father visited Massachusetts to see us for the last time. He was very fond of our son. He had a disposable girlfriend then waiting for him in DC, and he was asking if my son would move to live with them. My son ultimately rejected that offer. After that visit, Elias and I were still communicating by phone and email until 2010, when the Armenian villains intruded between us as well. Since then, Elias and I haven't exchanged a word. He publishes and republishes my authored articles in his scientific journals, but that's what looks on the surface. In reality, we do not cross a word to this day. In 2009, during the second year of my postdoc program, the two Armenian scums learned that I was in Boston at BU by seeing my published article on the internet. They started harassing my BU colleagues to denigrate and libel me, which I also learned from the last meeting with William Anthony, the director of the entire center. From the outburst of malice, these hooligans were opening email accounts under my name and printing out falsehood to show to the police, and after deleting both senders' and receivers' email accounts entirely. These hooligans defensively contend that I am making all this up as I am also a novelist. Not at all, these are facts. Would I fabricate stories herein? I would compose something funny and entertaining. Unfortunately, whatever I say about these hooligans is the absolute truth, and the truth about them is boring and ugly, and I cannot control it. While I was unaware what was going on their end, in April 2009, Marina Noble emailed me asking to meet, to hang out together, as she said. I ignored, but she persisted insanely, without self-esteem, so typical of her. After her several emails, I saw that she was up to something dirty yet to come, and I decided to meet her shortly, just to explore what was in her mind. I mentioned to Marina that I was taking my son to Somerville Movie Theater in Davis Square for a new children's movie, Coraline. Marina agreed and told that she and her junior daughter Sophia will arrive in maximum 40 minutes and we all together will go to the movie theater. She asked to be prepared and wait for them outside in 30 minutes, which we did. As she was late, I took my son to the mini park across our building to continue waiting for them. An hour had passed and Marina still did not show up. Her phone wasn't responding. I decided that she lied again and I took my son back home. Being late 2 hours, she called from our external entrance and asked to open the coded door. Visiting our place, Marina and her daughter were expressively impressed with some wall art and furniture. I would never imagine that 3 years after she would plug into the internet and write lengthy defamatory posts in her favorite hate sites, globally declaring that I was a Nazi spy as my apartment was full of Nazi swastika. So you know, Marina is a Mighty Mouse cretin by the textbook definition. Under Nazi swastika, she meant the ceramic triskelion that I had on my shelf, standing near this harlequin that I had purchased online from the Tuscan art store. As she never knew what a triskelion is and which country it represents, in this case it is the Isle of Man, she thought that it was a German swastika. And I had only one triskelion, not the entire apartment full of it. So if I speak German, that makes me a Nazi spy. If I speak Russian, that makes me a KGB agent. I also speak some French, so it makes me a DGSE agent this time. Further, as a Christian, I always have 2 bottles of wine in the winter, Pinot usually. I am not a drinker. I just like to have 2 bottles of wine at home in case I have unexpected guests. Seeing the 2 bottles in the winter, Marina posted on the internet with delusions of magnitude that she had seen 32 bottles of wine in my place and therefore I am an alcoholic. Her evil, defamatory, redundant posts that were popping up on the first page by search of my name were also conveyed to her troll, this lunatic Arachachatrian, who bombarded the internet repeating her libels and obscenity without even having seen or known me. These 2 criminal bandits, exercising trollism and impersonations, were confident that later they would twist the story that actually I had posted all these horrendously damaging rants about myself, which doesn't make sense, does it? And ironically, it was Bill Noble, Marina's second husband, who was an alcoholic, per her own words. Our building was on Walnut Street with windows overlooking Pearl Street. Marina asked whether I used the convenience store on Pearl Street, and I told her rarely, however the store manager likes me. Hearing that, she outburst, "I gonna grab something from that store." I confronted that I needed nothing, and if we were going to watch the movie as planned, then we had to leave. She insisted and left, waiting for her for another 20 minutes. I looked from the window and guess what? She was patiently talking on cell phone on the street with her face turned red. So all these 20 minutes she had been talking to her evil mentor, the stalker Karine Martirosyan, who had dispatched her for an exploratory mission about my lifestyle, income, and the rest. Finally, Marina entered the convenience store and oddly stayed there for another 25 minutes. With a 4-hour delay, we finally got to the Somerville movie theater. As callous as she is, Marina picked up 4 tickets for a different movie while I wanted to be separated from her with my son. As she bought the tickets, I bought the meal and popcorn, to be even. While entering the movie hall, my son and I chose one of the back rows and took 2 seats that were not even perfectly in the middle, leaving those for Marina and her daughter. 4 minutes passed, she entered the hall, perhaps they had been in the restroom, and to our surprise they chose the row before us and 2 seats right in front of us, covering our sight. Can you imagine? The entire hall was empty and they could choose a plethora of sitting options, but she wanted to sit right in front of me so I would watch her back. That's how profoundly obsessed and competitive she is. And we are not even rivals. I have thrice more degrees and experiences than she does, let alone my parents versus hers. Out of politeness, we were watching her chosen movie. 3 minutes passed, Marina abruptly stood up and told, "We have to leave. I don't like this movie. It doesn't have subscripts." So she didn't quite understand verbal English. As she had purchased the tickets, my son and I obeyed. Exiting the hall, Marina went to the ticket box to complain about the subscript issue. She just loves to complain. She wanted to return all 4 tickets for a refund. The manager refused, as we already had used the tickets. But out of courtesy, she gave Marina vouchers amounting 4 ticket prices. Taking the vouchers, Marina called her husband, Bill Noble, explaining happily in front of us that she had 4 vouchers and in a few days their family could visit the theater to watch a movie for free. My heartbroken son was hearing all that. On the way back in the car, her daughter Sophia, who was as crazy as her mother, a hyperactive, pervasive child, hit my son's forehead with the heavy metallic latch plate of the seatbelt. And guess what? Marina never apologized, never felt a bit sorry about that. It's too much for one day, isn't it? What I was thinking. Little did I know that this was nothing compared to the gigantic harms that she had yet to surprise us with. In the final months of my postdoc program, I self-petitioned for permanent residency, paying from my pocket without any sponsor or legal representation, and I did it secretively from Boston University. My U.S. national interest claim was favored very quickly, based on which I applied for green cards for me and my son as my dependent. I never used my son from a U.S. citizen for my immigration purposes. I did it all alone, myself. During the pending process, I foolishly replied to Marina Noble's email from my Lycos.com account. Yes, I did it again. I remember the date, June 22nd, 2010. A symbolic day because Hitler invaded Russia on June 22nd. That's why I remember the date. While World War II lasted 7 years, the war against me lasts to this day, making a 13-year duration so far. In my reply email, I told Marina that I was considering to suing Karine Martirosyan for the latest crime of fraud in Kosovo. I really didn't intend to sue due to the time bar and jurisdictional issues, but I wanted to shake the evil. And the hell got loose open. Marina Noble, who was naming Karine Hitler, always asserting that she hates and mocks Karine and they are not even communicating, forwarded my email to that same Karine. As Marina masters forgery in the email forwarded mode, which I know based on her own confessions of her cheating on her employer in 521 Mount Auburn Street in Watertown with forged conference invoices in forwarded mode, I think that she had garnished my non-threatening email with some ugly craziness. Karine entered a panic psychosis, knowing her own guilt, and jumped ahead to use the first filer advantage, reporting fake and fabricated content to the local Westboro police and even walking with her unhinged, malign Western Armenian husband to Boston University police to ruin my reputation when the email in question was non-threatening, wasn't directly sent to her, was not sent from my Boston University account, and wasn't about Boston University. So she has been my co-worker for many years. There is an issue with email. It's not even clear who has sent it. Instead of finding ways to ask me, either by phone or by email, who has sent that email, this scum Karine waits no seconds to jump to police, and not only to her local police, but to my university police that has nothing to do with her grievance. And where is the crime anyway? Who is the victim? Both Westboro and BU police clearly told me that they will not press charges if I give up with the idea to sue her. Imagine, this was a banal corruption on steroids. The reason that these nobodies were able to persuade the police was Karine's idiot but nefarious husband, Paul Noroyan, a Lebanese Armenian who is a cahoot of cops. I demanded the email in question, the subject of their criminal harassment accusation. Can you imagine? Projecting themselves and accusing me of things that actually they have done to me. But both Westboro and BU police refused to share it, and to this day I still haven't seen it. I don't know the exact content of what was reported to police. BU Police Detective Jili Binkanovich only sent me a 4-line summary. No facts, no logic. She utterly refused to share the copy of the email in question. Some say that Sally Rogers and Zlatka Rusinova were also involved here to ruin my reputation by using these bandits, BU outsiders, because there were so many hide-and-seek and peekaboo moments there in that case. And by phone, she was more occupied with protecting Zlatka Rusinova and Sally Rogers, who, by her words, had nothing to do with this case, rather than Karina Martirosyan, who was the foiler of the case. This was a dark mess, a primitive female shenanigan, a group attack, and this policewoman must be ashamed of herself. During the pending green card process, I decided to move to South for better housing options, as after the postdoc program, I had no income and continued wasting on high rents in Massachusetts. When that self-entitled megalomaniac, Karina Martirosyan, brought that malicious case and both police told me that they are not pressing any charges as there was no case, I moved to Georgia to reinstall new life. I bought and assembled new furniture, made a new house for my child. Meantime, Karina had been asking from our mutual acquaintances about my new location, so she knew that I was no longer in Massachusetts. The Armenian criminals then misled the courts in Massachusetts that I was a resident of Massachusetts when several months before their action, I already had Georgia state ID, my child was attending a Georgia public school, and he had Georgia Medicaid. Renting senile or next day retiring judges, they tried to default the case in my absence as their conspiracy was hilariously stupid. Now look, just one example of Karina Martirosyan's police report against me. See how unhinged she is. In all her reports, starting from 2009, she knew my social security number. And in some of her reports, she has even handprinted my SSN. In 2015, I applied to change my social security number, but the SSA did not change it, requiring a proof of grand-scale monetary loss. And my unearned wages, because of this bandit's defamation, were not considered as a loss. On top of lying to the police, these Armenians are using fake phone numbers as if belonging to witnesses that eventually do not exist. I filed objections and memoranda in the courts depicting their multi-layered fraud. Parallel to their manipulations and the abuse of the authorities, the hacker Marina Noble and her accomplice Ara Khachatryan, who has been dumped to the US from the mental asylums of Armenia, continued Karina's mission of destroying me by weaponizing the internet with thousands of vicious defamatory posts and impersonations that were popping up on the first Google page by my name search. Seeing the evidence, in December 2014, a magistrate judge named their crimes terroristic threats. There were 3 major waves of internet terror against me. The first was right after my mother's tragic death, when I was mourning a fresh grief, and they knew that. Second was when they learned that I was admitted by Emory Law School, and instantly they tried to ruin it by contacting the law school and even bragging about it on the internet. The third wave was when they learned that their efforts had failed, that I'd earned my law degree anyway, from Seton Hall School of Law for lesser tuition, and that really puzzled them, intensifying their terror. On one hate site alone, named Scam Group, later changed to Scamero, Marina Noble had opened 3 forums titled by my name and another titled by Karina's name to impersonate me. She was posting and reposting the same lengthy, wild accusations to the degree that she was changing already the 83rd page of the same internet site. And each page contained some 40-50 posts by her. So that hate site alone contained around 4,000 posts about me. In my book, I will detail how I involved police to remove that site, at least because the site owners did not care how my underage son was bullied by these vandals. Marina Noble also attacked my LinkedIn connections, being jealous even of that. She damaged my authored books and YouTube videos. Just in one day, Marina Noble posted 33 redundant and irrelevant reviews under my various books, declaring a big lie. Naira has fled from Massachusetts to avoid a lawsuit brought against her by Zlatka Rusinova and Sally Rogers from Boston University after they had fired her. Firstly, I have never been fired from Boston University or elsewhere. I completed my postdoc program and even got an extension. Secondly, she was naming it a short-term internship when it was a 2-year postdoctoral program, and how could even one be fired from an internship? Thirdly, Zlatka and Sally Rogers had never sued me, as far as I am aware. Marina would declare to the world that I am not the author of my books, or would ask the readers not to buy my books because I will steal their identity. Such a diabolic moronism. I had no access to know who is even buying my books. The hooligans had also opened websites under my full name, like nairamatevosyan.com. So if you would enter those scam websites titled by my name, you would be navigated to their defamatory posts in complaintsboard.com or other hate sites where they were naming me bipolar, psycho, Nazi spy, Russian spy, KGB agent, identity thief, for no reason whatsoever. And eventually, they are the identity thieves. Moreover, they were declaring on my behalf, scamming under my name, that I am bombing the White House. Imagine? And other madness like this that effectively ruined me. These bandits who have no single publications were also attacking my scientific articles, authored by 2 different extensions of my name, such as Naira Roland Matevosyan, where Roland is my father's name, and Naira R. Matevosyan, where the middle initial R stands for my patronymic. Knowing well that I authored all of them, still they were declaring in their posts, Naira is stealing others' works, but we don't know which half is hers. They were embedding the URLs of my scientific publications on pornographic, obscene websites. They were contacting the faculty of my son's father to demonize me, then bragging about it on their Facebook timelines and in the hate sites. This Rapansky lunatic also messaged me via Facebook and threatened to slit my throat. The evidence is still there, in the locker, but my local police did nothing, as Georgia does not understand digital death threats or harassment. It's only Massachusetts can criminalize somebody just for one non-threatening email, without even bothering to find out who is the sender. After learning about my degree in law, in November 2016, they opened 4 blogs titled with my name, where they were giving ridiculous herpes curing advices on the global web with redundant, unhinged stupidity, nonsensical sentences confessing on my behalf of having this incurable infection that I have never had. Never. In one of those blogs, you can see a patient's prescription record, a provable link to their workplace. Yet my local police moved no finger, and the magistrate judge only issued arrest warnings against them. That's it. They had opened fake dating profiles under my name. They even had opened fake job applicant profile in Emory portal. They would also scam me as potential employers, as recruiters from Lawrence Township in New Jersey, asking my CV in Word format. They ruined any opportunity for my personal life, as their posts were flooding the internet and popping up with a very high search index. Their crimes and libels were nothing less than cutting my oxygen, because as a single mom and job seeker, the very basic things were stolen from me: personal life, career, happiness, security. And they were not shy posting, Naira will never achieve her American dream, and nobody will marry her. We promise. They were naming me an adopted abused child, a bastard. I neither was adopted nor abused. My identity is the parents who raised me, who honored me with their surname from day one of my life. I wasn't adopted. My mother had been managing the labor of my biological mother. I was discharged from the maternity hospital with a birth certificate bearing the names of my marvelous parents who raised me, who were doctors and healthcare leaders. My dad died unexpectedly when I was 17. My mom outlived him 30 years and never remarried. This awful war started right after her death. These vandals egregiously insulted and libeled my precious son, ruined his teenhood. They stole his smile. He will never be the same. As eventually all those phony courts were attacks on a property outside the US that belongs to my son, Marina Noble, teaming with my non-biological relatives, had been promising them that she will do her best to deprive me of motherhood. And that's why, during the pending court case, she filed a complaint from Massachusetts to Georgia that she's concerned about my son because I'm bringing boyfriends to my house. First off, I don't have boyfriends. I didn't have boyfriends then either. Secondly, if she was concerned about my son, why she was bullying my son every single day on the internet? After her one visit, the social worker understood that the complaint was false and dismissed it. However, she also hinted that the false complainer was a very sick, sexually disturbed, salacious person, deeply obsessed with me. And that was Marina Noble. Who else? It's practically impossible to list all the harms in one video. It's too much. But the worst harm is this, what I'm currently doing. Because she pulled me down at her level. I cannot move forward with my life until their crimes are solved. Under this terrorism, I filed 17 police reports, 2 protective orders, obtained 4 arrest warnings against them. In all my legal actions, I never sought monetary gain. I only wanted to stop the vandalism. I also changed my name for my protection, but that didn't help as they found it out and continued libeling my boss old and new names combined. Learning that I graduated a law school to end my legal career before it would even start, they brought several bogus, fallacious, malicious legal actions in Massachusetts and Georgia, many of them filed simultaneously, repeating the same smears and fabrications. And in addition, these hooligans would intentionally scam me with threatening phone calls or emails to suppress my spirit. In their internet attacks, these hooligans would mock my law degree, which is a Juris Master degree. As I never intended to become a practicing lawyer, then a member of the Federal Bar Association, I also presided as a moot court judge in D.C. Superior Court and the U.S. Court of Federal Claims. In my law school, I didn't study legal procedure. I was taught torts, biotech law, intellectual property law, Stark law, etc., but not legal procedure. Having no knowledge or experience in legal procedure and practice, I had no choice but to represent myself pro se in all cases. Behind my fight was a multitasking single mom, a 24/7 home coach of my son's cyber school. When, due to these lawsuits, I was forced to write my motions, notices, appeal briefs, and certiorari, I abandoned my child's studies, but he did it all alone, graduating high school with A grades and starting college in the same year. The hardest part of being pro se was that by writing my own court files, I relived the pain over and over. They didn't believe that I would write appeal briefs or certiorari without any aid or consulting. I also issued subpoena for witnesses, hoping that there would be a jury trial. These bandits trolled on the internet that the issued subpoenas were fake and fraudulent, when in fact in the DeKalb Superior Court, any pro se party can write a subpoena and have the court clerk sign and seal it for $5 only. See sample. In all cases, the bandits had their installed judges to avoid jury trials and decide without fact-finding or forensics, without due process, and even without process. They didn't serve me. I voluntarily took the fight as I had a solid case against them. I learned about their lawsuit either by emails or from DeKalb Champion newspaper, where they had published about the case to avoid their obligation of service. Check one of that physically and mentally dangerous demons, Marina Noble's posts. Reduce yourself and feel what I have gone through for decades. In Georgia case, I went through 4 harassing depositions where the same nasty, irrelevant, offensive questions were being asked over and over again, to which they got no answers. They were asking about my social security number, monthly child support amount, the maiden name of my son's paternal grandma, so they would dig into the finances of my son's father, which I prevented. That horrid journey not only was offensive, but painfully regressive, as having my law degree and so many dreams thereof, I supposed to be in the stage of building a nice life for me and my child. But instead, they set my clock back again, like they had done 10 and more years ago. And now I was addressing their hesitations, you see, about my meritorious immigration, naturalization, my travels, degrees. When I asked my son, why did these lowlifes categorically disbelieve in my sole achievements, his answer is, because it's too much for them. I had victories and losses, of course. I successfully recused 4 judges. Scott Hunter bullied Doolin. I timely reported errata sheets from the deposition tapes. I started the criminal investigation against the corrupt sitting Judge Siliger, who retired shortly after. As for the nefarious rats and thugs, Karine Martirosyan and Paul Noroyan, who had filed a bunch of cases in their state, Massachusetts, against me, a Georgia resident, with 2 experienced lawyers and all judges backing them, I alone made them withdraw their insane monetary demands in the Massachusetts appeals court level, and even made them pay my appeal fees. Now about Marina Noble's crazy lawyer, who has criminal records, speeding tickets for what he has paid fines, thus showing that he has impulse control disorder. He also has sanctions by Florida Supreme Court based on the petition of Florida Bar Association against him. I also intend to open a comic museum of courts to display all unhinged, illicit, unconstitutional, laughable orders, in many of which even parties' surnames were crossed and mixed based on the request of my adverse parties to intentionally misspell or misplace their forenames and surnames in the case titles, so the court cases will not be searchable by their names. The Framingham court was issuing notices as if signed by an already deceased clerk, John DeLuca, who had died 2-3 months prior to the date of those notices. There were no jury trials despite my demands, no qualified witness, and no witness at all. All court orders were pre-written by the attorneys of these thugs, and some of them were handed in front of me to the sitting judge to sign. The senile Siliger, over 80 years of age, signed this order in front of me without even reading it, to notice at least 2 things: that his name was misspelled and the demand of all properties that I hold anywhere in the world, an insane, irradical demand. The other order in Massachusetts was simply nullified by the Appeals Court of Massachusetts. I remember my first argument in the appeal brief I wrote in Massachusetts, and that was around the standing clause of Article 3. I argued that the other party didn't have standing for many reasons. One was that they failed to show alleged damage or injury with objective specifications, and also the more I said that they were evil and dangerous, the more they were proving me right. So in that sense, there was no controversy between us, and therefore they didn't have standing. They have been the malicious aggressors over the decades preceding the lawsuit and during the pending lawsuit as well, and I will detail in my book how they were exercising barriers to prevent my appeal, which was my right, not a luxury. I had to file a discretionary appeal, so the Massachusetts Appeals Court would compel the lower court to accept my 6 notices of direct appeal. However, the appeal courts decided to please and appease their fellow judges, the lower court judges. Overall, who am I, right? A pro se single mom that refuses to kneel before the evil? The appeals court in Massachusetts issued short, nonsensical summary decisions, and in Georgia there was no decision at all. They issued Rule 36, which means that the judges cannot decide anything. And both indicated that their decisions shall not be used as precedents. In my post-appeal filings, I challenged the appeal courts, asking them a simple question. So what, you don't believe in your own words? Well, as you see, overall, it was a circus, showcase of power, which didn't work. At the damages hearing in Georgia, I declared that Marina Noble is a prostitute, which is a common knowledge. Yet the senile judge didn't care that I immigrated to this country for my intellect and merits, whereas the brainless Marina Noble perpetually harasses married men by blackmail, trying to ruin their families and open a space for her and her daughters. I have met numerous evil and dangerous people in my life, but Marina Noble is beyond any frames. She is a plague, smear, a constant liar, no intellect. She can declare to the world that you are a liar simply because she's unaware of your facts. Using this disoriented lunatic troll, she was damaging me on a daily basis on his Facebook and numerous internet sites. One example, I had shared a memory on my Facebook timeline about how I was fond of Montserrat Caballé and Freddie Mercury's joint performance of Barcelona in Spain, and that I had the disc, which I was listening while I was driving my car Opel Ascona. They made a huge fuss of it when I was telling the truth. But of course it was a matter of their profound jealousy because I had my driving license since my age of 18 years, whereas they haven't touched a car until their ages of 40 or 50. But they twist it this way. Witnesses say that such things have never happened. Now, where is the logic? I was driving my German car every day from home to work and back. Who are those witnesses? On which crossroad they were standing and how they knew in which part of the town what disc I was or wasn't listening in my car? Now, do you understand whose victim am I? It was very hard for me to address the terror of those cretins. I have never met or known this lunatic harasser, Ara, originally from Rapan, remote Armenia, who has been dumped to the US by the mental institutions in Armenia and didn't have any employment history in Armenia. So in 2014, he messaged me on Facebook, plainly confessing that my information was doxed to him by Karina and Marina. He insulted me and my son without having seen or known my son, who then was just 11 years old. And then he threatened to come to Atlanta to slit my throat. I immediately reported that case to police. I gave my login data to police. The police entered my Facebook, saw the evidence, and this interstate criminal case was created against this lunatic. But it went nowhere because they influenced my police. That's end of the story. And this one, their hidden friend Karina, is even a worse danger. As described by her one and only friend Marina Noble, Karina Martirosyan is a cheap person, a penny dweller, brutal, malicious, detached from the reality. Marina Noble was naming her Hitler in the public. Until her age of 40 years, Karina was sleeping in the underground student dorms for no cost. She notoriously imprints me, trying to equate us, which I don't take lightly because it's annoying to me, given her narrow horizon, absolute absence of originality or authenticity. She has never had a romance in her entire life. She has no clue in the arts or culture and is a terrible mother. She has been perpetually accusing me of things that she has exactly done to me: stalking, criminal harassment, trying to set my clock back, ruining my career because of her uncontrolled malice. She has been disseminating my social security number illegally obtained by her to various police departments when the police weren't even asking that number from her. She was filing delusional complaints. She has skipped a conference some 10, 11 years ago because of her fear that I would be there. That's one of her complaints, for example. She was falsely accusing me of sending her email, and then she was deleting her entire email account soon after, when it was in her interest to keep her email account for evidence if she were truthful. But of course, she's a monster. 2 years after, in 2013, she opened a new email account and sent me a begging email to not retaliate. I neither had time or money for retribution or revenge, but she periodically ran ruining campaigns against me. The last one started in 2020 and lasts to this day. Dumped by the first husband in Armenia after a short marriage, a late marriage following her old spinstership, Karina embraced another calculating marriage in the US, and Paul Noroyan is her second husband, although he didn't know during their marriage that he was her second husband. Paul Noroyan is a Lebanese Armenian whom I have never met and whose picture you will never find on the internet because, according to Marina Noble, he is too ugly. A failed psychiatrist, he was federally prosecuted for violating the False Claims Act. He is a snitch and the cahoot of cops, and therefore each of his malicious and baseless complaints are easily intaken by police. This couple was trying to use the courts to collaterally damage me by removing my professional profiles that had nothing to do with their subject matter and that deeply pained them, as they are too behind of me. I will describe the details in my book. As you see, this war was based on petty female shenanigans, no substance. These bandits would reattack to cover their former vandalism with a new vandalism. They were doubling down. I fully agree with the magistrate judge who named their actions a terror. And people, please do understand that this is not happening because we are rivals. We are not rivals. These people are the most unsophisticated, the most limited persons I have ever known. And this is not a feud. This was a unilateral organized war against me, to eliminate me. Indeed, for several occasions, Marina has told me, don't jump over our heads. Karina has always publicly downgraded or denied my achievements. Zlatka Rusinova was telling me at BU, you're gonna slow down. Sally Rogers was removing my study flyers from the walls, and Marie Messidor was having psychiatric meltdowns, observing my speed at the workstation. So here we go. During this organized terror, I fought alone in 6 courts simultaneously, and there were days that 3 hearings were assigned on the same day. And in the morning of that very day, the demon Marina Noble would attack me by email and threaten me with a new lawsuit to come, to break my spirit an hour before the hearing. They used the COVID pandemic to enjoy the fallacy of court hearings by phone. In one hearing, I even told the so-called judge on the other end of the phone, I'm not sure that I'm talking to the judge or to the court's plumber. The bottom line, going through this, I never stopped entertaining my son. We would continue traveling together as planned and even taking trips in the weeks between court hearings. Because you know what? The show must go on. Now, as promised, the last section will cover travels with my son, excluding my solo travels. I took many flights while I was pregnant, so in that sense, my son has traveled with me in Europe and Canada. After my childbirth, he was my travel company from the age of 3 years when I took him with me to the Humphrey program at Emory and CDC. Overall, with shorter stays in Washington, D.C. and Maryland, my son and I have lived in Massachusetts for 3 years and in Georgia for 15 years so far, and I will not reflect on the countless trips we had in those 2 states. This section is dedicated to our travels in the states other than Massachusetts and Georgia over the Vicennial period. During my Humphrey program, I took my son to Chattanooga, Tennessee. We went there with the group. Sadly, the pictures from that trip are missing. During our Boston years, we would often take train to Providence, Rhode Island. We love Providence. It was my second year of postdoctoral residence in Boston. To save my son for a week from the severe Massachusetts winter, I took him to sunny Florida, to Walt Disney World. I booked a hotel in Kissimmee. The flight Boston-Orlando was just horrible and I can't quite forget it. The same year, 2 months later, I took my son to Milton Hershey Chocolate World. As the former flight to Florida was awful, we commuted by train, Boston-Philly. Regretfully, to my surprise, I could recover only a few pictures from Hershey-Harrisburg trip. However, I did find our round Amtrak tickets from Boston to Philly and then to Harrisburg and Hershey and back. November 2009, New Haven, Connecticut. The same year, during the Thanksgiving break, I took my son to the Yale Yard in New Haven and again we commuted by train from Boston. I don't find any picture from this trip. I will probably find them later and share them in my book. February 2010, Austin, Texas. From the Austin-Bergstrom Airport, one can't miss why Austin is known as the live music capital of the States. This was a short business trip and the inviting organization fully covered my flight fare and the hotel. I chose the Embassy Suites, my favorite brand. I only paid for my son's flight tickets. Time was scarce in Austin, so I only managed to take my son to restaurants and the Texas Science and Natural History Museum. He adored the purchases from the museum's gift shop, as you may notice. September 2010, Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. My son, then 7, was very fond of Titanic story. His bookshelves were overwhelmed with Titanic literature, giant books, interactive games, models. He knew by heart the names of famous passengers, Isidore and Isa Strausses, the owners of the Macy's department store, Joseph Ismay, even some names of the second-class passengers such as Eva Hart, Lawrence Bisley. It became my goal to take him to a thrilling Titanic museum. In 2010, there were only 2 popular Titanic museums in the States. One was in Branson, Missouri, and the other in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. The visit was right after our move from Massachusetts, thus I chose Tennessee for the closeness to Georgia. It was a unique experience, approaching a giant Titanic by taxi in a rainy day. He absolutely enjoyed the grand staircase, touching the iceberg, and much more. Only these 2 pictures are photoshopped by the museum, $20 each. We also visited a bunch of eccentric museums in Pigeon Forge, such as the Upside Down Wonderworks house or attraction sites. It was the time when our green card applications were pending. I had finished the postdoc program in Boston under a non-immigrant visa and was adjusting my status for permanent residency. In that waiting period, paying high rents in Massachusetts without an income was unwise. So we moved to the south for cheaper housing where we had to wait for the green cards. I had initially chosen Columbia, South Carolina as our destination. I even had remotely secured an apartment in Crown Lake Apartments on Oak Crest Drive in Columbia, paying a non-refundable $80 application fee and admin fee. I had arranged my son's schooling in that zip code, Windsor Elementary School, Richland County. All of a sudden, by a grave misfate, I received an email from an old Armenian acquaintance offering 2 rooms in her house and lying that the rooms were furnished. She was asking cheaper monthly rent than that I had to pay in South Carolina. In reality, the offered rooms were absolutely empty, non-furnished, and so I went to buy furniture and made comfortable rooms for my son. Soon after, that woman exhibited serious and troubling issues, and of course lying about so many things. To reverse my mistake, I rented again a large apartment for me and my son in Atlanta Northeast and started furnishing it again. There we resided 10 years. After Mass, we moved to a townhome. Upon our return to Georgia, we received our green cards based on the approval of my meritorious NIW claim. Seems that I had everything ready to start a prosperous life with my son, but in fact I was better off under my non-immigrant visas than I was after having my permanent residency and citizenship because of the following 14 years of unemployment. I started writing multi-genre books, professional and also travel guides, which were more popular. I pioneered with a unique genre of travel guides. I was choosing animal characters as tour guides, manually cropping them and placing on the backgrounds of realistic places, tourism destinations. I never used any Photoshop program and still do not know any of those. With some book royalties and freelancing income, plus a modest child support that my son received until he turned to 18 years of age, I was able to make ends meet and secure a comfortable life for my son. During that decade, I published 16 articles in scientific journals and also wrote 167 books. I stopped writing books in 2022, with Via Colossus being the last one, as with their systematic attacks by internet war of defamation and phony courts, those Armenian villains killed my spark. I no longer have that inspiration. That is why it's almost 3 years that I'm not writing. And it takes so long to procrastinate the writing of my memoirs. I haven't started yet. So during that decade, we restricted our travels. My son and I were only visiting Stone Mountain in Georgia quite often with our VIP membership cards, Blue Ridge, Cabbagetown, and Helena, the German city in northeastern Georgia. September 2015, Washington, D.C., Pentagon City, Virginia. Let me first note that 2015 was the only year when those Armenian bandits took a break in their bitter war against me because they had assumed that their inflicted damage had effectively transferred. Let me explain. In fall 2013, I was admitted by Emory Law. Stalking and learning about it, these Armenians contacted Emory Law to defame me, hoping that they would influence the admission team. They even bragged about their malicious communications in their posts from June to August 2014. Posts titled Naira the Wannabe Lawyer. Yet they had no idea that I had asked Emory Law to defer my program as I wasn't able to cover the high tuition. I wasn't working, and the annual federal loan alone would not cover the tuition, so I had to look for private lenders, which I didn't want to do. In fall 2013, Emory kindly deferred my studies per my request, and in winter 2014 I again asked for the second deferral. These animals had been perpetually exploring whether I was with Emery Law. Resting assured that I wasn't, they got satisfied that I was destroyed and left me alone for 1 year, 2015. During that time, I was secretively studying in Seton Hall Law for the identical program with twice lower tuition. Learning about my graduation and new degree in law in 2016, the villains resumed their bitter war, and some of you already know the rest. Unhinged and lengthy defamatory posts with wild conspiracy theories, so the world would read as the first news about me while Googling my name. Impersonations, insults, assaults, threats, hacking, scam emails, doxing, you name it. In September 2015, I had a small business meeting and I took my son for a 3-day trip in Pentagon City, Virginia and Washington, D.C. We stayed at the Embassy Suites, my favorite brand. My son was 12. Finding some time in day 2, we visited 4 museums closely situated to each other. The Air and Space Museum, the International Spy Museum, Madame Tussauds Museum, and the Portrait Gallery. In 2015, these artifacts were in Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. April 2016, Washington, D.C. As a member of the Federal Bar Association, I was invited to preside as a panel judge in the 19th and 23rd Thurgood Marshall Moot Court competitions. The first visit was in 2016. My son was 13 years old.
Yes, Your Honor, and nothing in the record shows.
In the following 6 years, the Armenian terror intensified. Learning that I was improving my life, had opened an online office, they attacked me as thousands of wasps on steroids. The central theme of their lies and libels on multiple sites was to mislead the world that I was mentally sick, when I wasn't. Neither there were any medical records suggestive of a mental illness, nor did I take any therapy session with a therapist or psychologist. In fact, I was tortured, not sick. To alleviate my pain, I was writing travel books, among other genres, which too were attacked by these same villains. This time their agenda had twofold purpose. Those 2 malicious women from Boston University were using these Armenians to save their face, as their misportrayal of me was proven to be false. They were panicking that I did not leave the country as they hoped, and even earned a law degree, presided as a judge. To regain public trust, now they wanted BU outsiders, these hooligans, to repeat their words. Concurrently, my non-biological relatives hunting after my parental properties outside the US wanted to smear me with poor mental health declarations to disinherit me. Little did they know that I strategically had asked my mother up front to put the will on my son. The attacks on me were so cruel and egregious that even the evilcomplainsboard.com site owner, who was openly backing these Armenian hooligans, wrote a comment: "If Naira is mentally sick, as you say, then why are you torturing her this way?" And of course, in a matter of minutes, the lunatic RR replied, "That's none of your business, shut up." I had the screenshots of those posts and comments and multiple others, but I cannot share everything in this video. I will have them in my book. Despite this terror, I remained focused. My son was then studying in Cyber Academy and I was his learning coach at home. I made sure that the terror would not distract or weaken me and his studies would not suffer. Besides, as planned, we both got our citizenships during that period. The concurrent phony, baseless attacks by the courts stole my solo parenting time from my child. My son was left to handle his school alone, but he did a great job, making me so proud. His father was never involved and did nothing to protect us during those hard times. Indeed, my son and I are all alone on earth. In that chaos, my son graduated high school without any 28 and started college the same year in 2021, age 18. Months before his graduation, in December 2020, we resumed our travels to take a break from the courts. Utah was my son's first choice from the shortlist. He was then 17. Conventionally, it was a 3-day trip to Salt Lake City with that incredible Utah temple, tabernacle, sermons in the streets, cheese factory, Gilgal sculpture garden, Syracuse. This is the Salt Lake. Very shallow. Great Salt Lake. My son enjoyed his first solo hiking in Wasatch Mountains. Here is the living room hiking trail to the mountain top. There are some hikers and my son Richard over there. Oh, we love snow. We haven't seen snow for 11 years. 2 months after the Utah trip, in February 2021, we flew to Montana for duck sledding in the Yellowstone National Park. We visited the Big Sky and the Gallatin Gateway, had chili parties in the wilderness, enjoyed the impeccable restaurants, and much more. I have a separate movie on this channel about our Montana experience.
Ready? Yep. All right, here we go. All right.
I'm on dog sledding adventure, Yellowstone.
Ba, 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 ba.
Dogs seem happy.
They're loving it.
In April 2021, 2 months after the Montana trip, we headed to Louisiana. To feel that contrast between the Rockies and a state with just 100 feet of average elevation above the sea level and with a capital with parts that are even below the sea level. This was the time when, achieving nothing in Georgia courts, the Vandals attacked me via Massachusetts courts, barking the same balderdash when I was preparing my son for a prom and high school graduation. The court in Massachusetts was blatantly trying to block my appeal from its insane and nonsensical rulings, which were too often like toxic scissors. Appeal was my basic right, not luxury. Yet by then, 6 of my notices of direct appeal, assembly, and transfer of records were ignored by the lower court. Tired of watching that circus of injustice performed by unserious courts, I chose to seriously enjoy life. And where else if not in New Orleans, the hub of jazz, Napoleonic code, and the best food in the country? Women, especially the primitive and limited ones like this, have always confronted me by forming groups, never one-to-one, never face-to-face. And I take that fact as a badge of honor, because they cannot be clearer about their fear of my strength. This time I used their organized offense as a propeller for memorable joy in Louisiana. My son and I stayed in one of the best hotels in NOLA, the Omni Royale on St. Louis Street. We took a suite with balcony overlooking the ever-eventful street. We dined in top-notch restaurants, took a swamp tour in Slidell, a steamboat nachos jazz cruise and dinner on Mississippi River, tried gator sausages in the French market, and much more, all in the same day. On day 3, before heading to the airport, we visited a couple of Louis Armstrong sites and of course were in Edgar Degas' house in New Orleans, where Degas had lived with his maternal relatives and where he created 18 paintings, 4 drawings and wrote 5 letters. You will find 3 separate and more detailed fragments of our NOLA trip on this channel. Returning from Louisiana with a fresh mind, I found a solution by filing a discretionary appeal and having the Massachusetts Appeals Court compel the lower court to allow my direct appeal. Being pro se with no aid, no advice or representation, I filed a solid appeal case from Georgia to Massachusetts. So thank you, Louisiana. The same year of high school graduation, in the fall of 2021, my son started college. We paused our travels for a while. Instead, I produced a set of kitchen videos on another channel, My Way Cuisine. For my son's excellent grades in the first 3 terms, I made a gift, resuming our travels in July 2022 with the next destination of Biltmore Estate in Asheville, North Carolina. Built in the Gilded Age, the Biltmore is a national treasure in French chateau architectural style with 250 rooms. Located in Pisgah National Forest, east of the Mississippi River. Up until 1914, the Pisgah Forest was a private property of Vanderbilt's after it was sold to the government. I have a separate movie about our Asheville visit on this channel where I hold a meticulous tour to the rooms in Biltmore as well as our activities in the Deer Park, including our visit to Claude Monet Digital Museum, and our visit to Antler Village for wine tour, wine tasting, souvenir shopping, visiting the Biltmore Legacy Museum, and impeccable dining, all in one day. 2 months after, in September, we flew to Kentucky for equestrian delights. This adventure required a serious preparation and shopping from the Dover Saddlery. On this channel, you will find a separate movie about that 3-day trip. Very briefly, on day 1, right after landing in the Bluegrass Airport in Lexington, we headed to Mary Todd Lincoln Museum, followed by our visit to the Bluegrass Distillery for a tour and whiskey tasting. We lodged in Embassy Suites in Lexington, my favorite brand. We spent the second day in the Kentucky Castle in Versailles, where we rode saddlebred horses, some of them world champions, as well as Dutch mare. We took a tour in the gardens and farms of the castle premises and dined in the castle's restaurant. On day 3, on our way to the airport, we visited Keeneland, known as the horse capital of the world. A few more stops in equestrian museums pleasantly filled the afternoon before we were boarded on the airplane to Atlanta. The same year, 2 months after, we took another equestrian trip, this time with Morgan horses in Oklahoma and with unusual accommodations. I have a separate video about this invigorating 3-day trip on this very channel. On day 1, right after landing in Will Rogers Airport, Oklahoma City, we headed to the American Banjo Museum. Missing our pre-ordered ride-on-water taxi, we drove to the Orr family farm for glamping. That's the word for camping in teepees or Conestoga wagons. Our spacious teepee of Cheyenne style accommodates 5 people, so it was quite enough for just 2 of us. I took the upper cot and my son took the king-size bed. Next day we spent in Cottonwood Creek Ranch and rode Morgan horses. After, we visited the Mixtape Obscura Museum. As our second water taxi ride was cancelled due to the windy weather, we gained time for a lovely dinner at Bourbon Street Cafe at Bricktown. Later on at the camp, I set a cozy fire and we enjoyed fried hot dogs and marshmallows. Watch the separate video of our Oklahoma adventures for inspiring information and sceneries. At the conclusion, as a single mom with no relatives, no siblings, a respected professional and formerly quite interesting woman who has rejected so many marriage offers, I have perpetually been wronged and damaged by countless bitter and plagiarized women, and I am used to handle those attacks. But these hooligans were different, the lowest and most trivial form of anything I had seen. Marina Noble has never had a reputation. Concerned about her negative impact on her overaging, psychotic daughter's potential personal life in the future, she was looking for a victim to throw the blame on, to destroy that person by all means, including story fabrications, projections, paranoia, gossips, digital falsehoods, scams, impersonations, pre-designed scandals, and internet wars. The other slut, this peasant, attacked me because of her guilt panic psychosis. She knew that sooner or later she would be held accountable for her crimes, including her Kosovo letter fraud or her endless and irresponsible perjuries before the police or court, to the extent that even the Framingham court suspended her activities, or her periodic stalking and attacks on me during my pivotal stages of life and success. Her spineless and diabolic Armenian husband from Middle East taught her the very dirty ways, which is to use the first mover's advantage and attack me by baseless and fallacious court cases with already picked up corrupt judges determined to destroy me even before the cases were docketed. They wanted to silence me as they were worried about the future of their children who would never be able to defend their bad and dangerous parents. And even the Framingham court understood that and suspended their activity, which is shown in the court's portal. Those who are having a hard time to connect the dots, my book will explain everything with facts and proofs. These hooligans and their lunatic mouthpiece ruined my career, my personal life, my son's teenhood, stole my son's smile, my time for him, and cost us astronomical monetary damages. But my son and I will continue traveling per our protocol because you know what? The show must go on.